Hello, and welcome to Eclectic Spacewalk Conversations. I'm your host, Nicholas McKay. Today, we're joined by Carey Baraka. Carey is a writer from Kisumu, Kenya. Carey has bylines in publications such as Popula, Lithub, Foreign Policy, and Johannesburg Review of Books. He also sings for a, quote, secret choir in Nairobi. Welcome to Conversations, Carey.
Thank you for having me here, Nicholas.
Awesome. So first off, before we get into who you are, Carey, let's start with how you came to be. So you wrote in a Quartz Africa piece, quote, "I am alive because my Kenyan great-grandfather quarantined 100 years ago, and here we go again." So end quote. So first, can you tell the story of your great-grandfather and also maybe a little bit of the color of the similarities and differences between what he went through maybe, a century ago compared to what you have and continue to go through in dealing with the ongoing COVID epidemic?
Right. So I remember, I think I was on Facebook. Sometime in April last year, I saw a post by my aunt, and then my aunt was saying how like her grandfather quarantined or whatever. And I thought like, oh, that's an interesting story. And at some point, it was that, oh wait, her grandfather is my great grandfather, right? So that's also my interesting story, I guess.
Yeah.
I asked my dad more about that story, and he told me more about it. And I asked like also other people. And it's very interesting to me because at that point, so this is like the late end of the First World War, 1920s. Yep. Also. Mm-hmm. There's like a wave of sleeping sickness which is sweeping through Western Kenya. Of course, like there's the Spanish flu, mm-hmm. Also there's sleeping sickness, and it was like sweeping like all through like Lake Victoria, so like Western Kenya, Uganda, mm-hmm. all the way into Congo. And so the more I read about it, and the more I talked to people about it, it was first of all interesting like to see like the similarities that like say my great grandfather had to quarantine, and I guess in his case he also had to move to a completely different area because part of the colonial strategy was to like in Kenya, that is the British would move people away from areas they were living, so it would remain empty. So he moved and he had to quarantine, and maybe like 2 days or 3 days after reading this story on my mom's Facebook, I was in hospital, and the people in hospital thought I might have COVID. Yeah. And at some point it moved from like it's not COVID, it's meningitis, and I was like, oh wait, can it not be COVID? Meningitis is much worse, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I saw the post. I was like, let me write this story. It's also I'm stealing my aunt's story, but it's also my story. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I noticed about sleeping sickness, also about like Spanish flu sickness, is how it lasted for years. I think the sleeping sickness was only ended in like that pandemic sometime in the 1930s.
Oh, so it went like a decade or so, or quite a long time. Oh, wow.
Yeah, more than a decade. And definitely at the start of all this, like there was like this feeling in the back of my mind that it would be like a few months, and then like everything will be back to normal, right?
Back to normal, as they say. Yeah. No.
Yeah, and it's almost like 1.5 years since the first case was reported in China, right? Yeah, so like those similarities between my great grandfather and like what is happening right now are very interesting to me.
Right. And we'll get into some of the historical, roots of Kenya, colonial rule and stuff like that. But it's all too familiar here in the United States as well, in the similar pandemics and stuff like that. But let's just keep moving on to you growing up. So in a piece for the publication Popula, you wrote, growing up in Kisumu, you were always aware of the train, but only in the back of your minds. So can you tell us about now your not great grandfather, but we already talked about him. Now let's talk about your grandfather and maybe growing up in Kisumu and the train to Uhuru. So basically, I loved the piece because you talked about, quote, nobody we ever knew boarded the train. No one owned a train set or train paraphernalia. In fact, apart from the train at the annual agricultural show, metro. No one had ever encountered one up close. So that was a very, very interesting kind of dynamic. So yeah, can you just talk about, you growing up in Kenya, and then also some of that aspect of, transportation and your grandfather as well?
Yeah. So I'm saying I'm sitting somewhere with an aunt of mine and my grandparents. In fact, like the very aunt whose Facebook post inspired my article. And we're having dinner in this it's the sort of establishment. It's so colonial that in 1921, a bunch of settlers sat in the lobby and just from the lobby shot a lot of African women who were nearby. It's a famous massacre in Nairobi. So we're sitting in this hotel and we are the only black table, right? Because there's the waiters, but you're not supposed to notice that. So we're sitting there and there is a person in Kenyan colonial history called Carey Francis.
Okay.
And I guess Kenyans of a certain age assume that my name is because of Carey Francis, even though it's not. So anyway, my grandfather and I are talking about Carey Francis, and I'm saying all these things about he's a terrible person, he's a colonialist, it's not such a good thing as a good colonialist, whatever. And I'm quoting this person called Odinga, and my grandfather is he's forget about Odinga. Odinga just had a grudge with Carey Francis. And he says something like one time Odinga wanted to go on holiday, and in fact it's actually in Odinga's book. Odinga wanted to go on holiday somewhere to the coast, but Africans only allowed to board the third class carriages of the train.
Okay.
But he wanted to buy a first class ticket. He didn't see why not. He can afford it. Why
Let's
not?
go.
It became a whole tiff with Carey Francis, who was his boss. Because Carey Francis had offered to buy him second class tickets. But Odinga was like, no, not third class, not second class, I want first class. And there are prior rifts, but that was one of the final rifts. So thinking about that train story, and then also other stories about trains appeared in Kenya just announced these deals to build a new railway line to replace the British built railway line. And there's all this of course it doesn't make any financial sense. It's I guess a white elephant. But there's this language in which this new railway line is being sold as there's going to be electric trains. There's going to be what we're going to move from one part of the country of the other in a few hours.
Right.
And so thinking about all those trains, it's just started writing that article around a vague idea of trains, right? And then other trains. My mom would go to high school and she would use the train. And she told me the story once of being in the train. So from Kisumu to somewhere called Kitale in close to northern Kenya.
Okay.
But it's part of where it's called the White Highlands, because the settlers took a lot of land there. Okay. And being in the train, and at some point a lot of times some white settlers would come in and force everybody, all the Africans go and sit in another carriage, right? And this is right. Of course post independence. So that train story, and then from TV, especially Western TV, there's a lot of train culture. You have kids having train sets or train paraphernalia. I think Big Bang Theory with Sheldon Cooper, a weird obsession with trains. And so you're seeing all this and hearing all these stories from my mother, whatever stories I'm reading in books about the train system in Kenya, but it doesn't exist at this point, right? At this point, I don't think there are any train rides between Kisumu and Nairobi, between Nairobi. There are no train rides in Kenya, full stop, and there are hardly even train rides for cargo. So I was thinking, about that.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that lack of trains, like I'm a kid who read Harry Potter, so like they would take the train to school, but like I'd never seen a train afterwards, apart from like Kenya like has this thing called like I think it's a British colonial thing called like cultural show, where like in each town there's like it's mostly a display for cultural goods, right? Crops, animals, new ways of planting,
Sure.
etc., etc. But then you'll have like certain things to like excite mostly the kids and I guess the adults, right? Who's painting. Um, you'll have like weird things like, look, woman who can fit in a bottle. And so like the creation show in Kisumu, like there was a train, but it was on a loop of maybe 500 meters or 600 meters.
Oh,
So you board it and like go on like 1 or 2 laps
it's over.
and it's over.
Yeah.
And so from then until I was 22, that was my only experience on trains ever, right? Yeah. So that's how I started writing that essay.
Well, so when you were 22, what was that? Did you go like somewhere else and get on like a high speed? What was that experience?
It was not a high speed train. So at some point I moved to Nairobi and I discovered that there's a train system service in Nairobi that nobody ever talks about. It's like it's a secret. Like I thought it was like, wait, there's a train service in Nairobi, and like people are like, yes, and it goes to like to certain places, right?
Okay.
And I took the train the first day, and it was so exciting. It was like, I mean, like first of all, like the allure of you don't have to sit in traffic, like.
Oh yeah. Oh, just you mean the logistics of just getting from point A to point B? Yeah.
No traffic jams, whatever. But also like the concept of like, oh my God, we're in a train. Look at us in a train. And I would like catch the train at I think 6 to go home. And I would have my book and I'd be reading the book. And it's like this really old locomotive. So you can totally hear it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The immersive aspect of it, it really like takes you over. Cause I kind of experienced that living in Chicago, giant trains culture going from place to place. I mean, it's a lot of underground and stuff like that, but but as we'll talk about more of the train stuff in kind of the allure of smart cities, and what kind of Konza, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that like some vestiges of the past are kind of rearing their head, not just with COVID, but also colonialism and new fangled like techno projects, technological projects. But first, let's get through some of our viewers. Basically just a quick history lesson. But first, a geography lesson I think would help. So Kenya lies on the east coast of Africa, about halfway up, going up the coast. You'll find the country bordered by the ocean to the southeast, and then going clockwise, Tanzania, Uganda, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia are all bordered. And then the city of Kisumu, where Carey grew up, is also almost directly on the equator. So let's just talk about, growing up in Kenya and different, that kind of culture. Because obviously I grew up in the United States, but I grew up in the southern United States in Chattanooga, Tennessee. But then I live here in Los Angeles. I've lived in New York, traveled a bunch. So definitely want to just get a feel for, what was it like growing up in Kenya?
I don't know.
You can say as much as you're comfortable with saying. Yeah.
It's the usual thing. Like I just say the thing about the equator, and I remember like a lot of times with like so of course like the equator is like it's not just in one place, right? But there are particular points where like it's marked, there's like a sign and a whole thing. You are now crossing the equator, right? So like we'll go and be like, whoop, southern hemisphere, whoop, northern hemisphere.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But like growing up in Kenya it's not that much different from like growing up like in a relatively stable country anywhere else.
Sure.
And because of like Kenya's heritage of colonialism, a lot of like so partly because of that, and so like because of like America's like cultural dominance, the sort of like cultural figures you look to are like mostly British or American, right? And I assume like Francophone countries look to like France or something. So we have the usual things like growing up as kids where we grew up, we were obsessed with like American music and film.
Well, did you want to be specifically like something when you wanted to be when you grew up, or like maybe earlier influences? You're saying a little bit. So you had a little bit of a Western influence, but you still definitely had some Kenyan influences and stuff. So well, maybe that juxtaposition is interesting for us to explore.
What do I want to be? I wanted to be a student at Hogwarts. Like, I don't think I had more ambitions. Maybe. No, anyway, like there's like a point when I wanted to like play sports professionally, right?
Oh, okay.
But I think even more than that, because like I think it's Jack Klosserman has an essay about the sort of like Harry Potter generation, like kids who are like 8, 9, 10, and like Harry Potter was like was first released, right? And then she says something like he has never read Harry Potter, but like he assumes that like these kids in like 15 years will be like the people setting popular culture. And all these movies will have like references to Harry Potter, and you won't get them, but it's fine. But like I was exactly those kids, right?
Right.
I don't, for a spell there, I don't think there's anything I cared more about than Harry Potter.
Hey, I was with you too. You know, I'm with you.
Yes. So I guess like reading Harry Potter, like I think at that time, the Quidditch World, I don't know why I remember this, but the Quidditch World Cup, Uganda beat Scotland in the Quidditch World Cup.
Okay, that was like a huge thing.
Oh, they're like really close to us.
Right.
So yeah, I guess like it's one of like the effects of like the internet and like how like culture is disseminated. Like we all like listening to 50 Cent or some American musician, and like like me and my friends are obsessed about Harry Potter, and we're all reading Enid Blyton, and and we're watching English sports like what Americans call soccer for some reason.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a soccer fan, and but people around me who I live internationally with, and they're football fans. It's constantly a thing. It's constantly an issue.
It's played using the feet.
Yeah, zing! I love it.
And so in retrospect, like I can see like certain things like say like of course in terms of like the things I care about, right? So like for instance, like I read a lot of like American and British writers as a kid, and I still do. But also like I've read like a lot of Kenyan and like other African writers. Also like the very interesting to me was like reading all these articles about how English-speaking people, especially like in Britain and the US, like they call themselves multilingual because they can speak like 3 languages.
Right. And it's like go to Africa and there's 8, 17. Yeah. Real multilingual.
And so like because of that, like you sort of like have like a duality of things. You can like do like talk to like people about cricket or like about Harry Potter, and like and doing it in English, but also like you have like inkling of like Swahili culture or like other African languages and like other cultures.
Well, who was someone that maybe stroked your curiosity the most? You said you were kind of obsessed with Harry Potter because, I mean, I think a lot of people kind of, scratch that itch, being a young person and then they're chosen and whatever. But like who, everyone feels that. But like who was maybe someone that maybe stroked that curiosity itch? Was it maybe a family member or maybe a teacher that kind of kept you going and interested in some of those things?
So I have this uncle who is
uncles are always there.
Yeah. A professor of English somewhere.
Okay.
And now that I look at it, like he was like he doesn't have kids. So my theory is that like he was trying to get one of his brother's kids to be a literature person, to be a book person.
Sure.
And the experiment was successful with me. So he got me like my first copies of Harry Potter, got me a few other books. But then also like my mother is a high school teacher. And
cool.
When I was a kid, I would go like hang out in a school. A lot of times like because like sometimes I'd have to go home with her. So like come from my school and then go to a school, right? But like my school is like primary school and has a high school. And the library has like more advanced reading.
Nice.
So I would go there at like lunchtime and then like leave at 4, and I'm just like in the library reading all this. Of course, like it's 90% African stuff.
Right.
But really like all these like books and so like classic African writers, the Chinua Achebe and the like Ngugi wa Thiong'os and like Kelechi Amadis and all these people. So like, I'm just like sitting in this library. And then when I was in high school, I went to like this really, really old Catholic school. One of those like first schools that were started for like African boys in Kenya. And naturally, the consequence of like it being old is that like, it has a lot of like books over the years, right?
Sure.
And a lot of it was like American. So like I would hide like one of the library and like read all these books. And they sort of like English textbooks. But at the end, there's always like the comprehension section, the lecture stories and stuff.
Got it.
So I remember like after high school, I would see all these things like in popular culture and be like, wait, I read that short story. I think there was like a movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and I was like, wait, I read that short story.
Right. Nice.
Someone like Rip Van Winkle, I'll be like, I read that short story in the library, or like Mark Twain. Yeah.
Well, how that seems it almost like that was like a very good early introduction or culturization, of not just like maybe education around in Africa, but also many international influences that probably set you up for success in moving forward with your literary and writing. I'm assuming all the words, stories and stuff.
Yeah, I guess. But like just to be like make sure I'm clear about this, the fundamental like thing was Harry Potter. That was like
if we're gonna be just clear, let's set this tone. Okay. I will make sure we're gonna put it in the section. Harry Potter is the game. Well, okay, so then let's keep moving on then. I really liked, so we'll get into some of the political stuff and kind of the history of colonialization with Kenya. But one of the best articles I think out of your repertoire was your, it was more of an ironic and satirical writer, is like how to write about Northern Kenya. And so it was very interesting as like a forcefully ironic, literary device. So I applaud you for like trying something out. So basically it was a sort of how-to guide. And in a tweet you summarize in your article, talk about the vastness of the landscapes, say that it looks like a forgotten country, but don't ask why that is so. Talk about the empty terrain you have to cover, the harshness of the abandoned lands, mention that the land has been abandoned because of banditry. And then of course you end some things about like 6 or 7 AK-47s on the cover of your article is also an excellent choice. And so I thought that was a very interesting thing of like using stereotypes and using kind of things that maybe some people who are not learned or like aware of some things or not cultured, they would kind of think negatively or something, and you kind of flip that on its head and say, okay, well, let's just write it at how you would do it at the most bare bones, and then hopefully that irony will leak through. So talk about maybe the writing process in general, and then maybe some of these cooler other interesting devices like this forcefully ironic device. So yeah.
So like that particular piece of writing to speak about like the idea is not originally mine. There's a writer called Binyavanga Wainaina. He's a Kenyan writer. He died in 2019.
Okay.
Maybe like I can't remember how long ago, it was 15 years ago, something more than that. Granta did this issue on, I can't remember what is the issue, but there's a lot of like writing about Africa.
Yeah.
And in response, Binyavanga wrote this, like he wrote a letter to the editors, and the letter is how to write about Africa, right? And he's saying like all these things like, so after it was a letter to the editors of Granta, but they published it.
You're like, yes. It went through that.
So like his is like always use the word Africa or darkness or safari in your title. Like titles may include the words Zanzibar, Maasai, Zulu, Zambezi, Congo, Nile, Big Sky, Shadow, Drum, Son of Bygone. Also useful are words such as gorillas, timeless, primordial, and tribal. not that people means Africans who are not black, while the people means black Africans, right? And after this essay, there's spawned like an entire category of how to, it's like how to write about India, how to write about where, how to write about where, and it's very easy to like dig into it. Like I was like, how to write about Haiti. Always say that it's the poorest country in the Americas. Say that it has no COVID vaccines or whatever, right? So that's what I was tapping into, like with that particular issue. But also like because like Binyavanga was sort of like one of the big Kenyan writers, one of the big African writers, but he himself had been criticized for his writing about people from northern Kenya.
Got it.
And it was like, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, it's like a cool literary trick that he did, but also it's like, I also want to criticize his writing about Northern Africa. So that's how that particular essay comes about. Yeah.
I think I need to take a page out of your book and his as well, and then maybe how to write about the USA, and it's all about American exceptionalism and all that kind of stuff. So very interesting. Cool. So let's keep moving on. So now I may mess up this name, but I'm trying. Yon Adhiambo Aworhu in Dust.
Yvonne.
Say it again.
Yvonne.
Oh, Yvonne. Yeah. Okay. So Yvonne in Dust said the national languages of Kenya are English, Kiswahili, and silence. So can you talk a little bit about place and home, as a structure? Because again, like you are from Kenya, you are from Africa, but like how much does that kind of come into your identity? Because also, that also with the history and everything like that. So can you talk about place and home a little bit?
So the full quote, there's usually like another sentence after that which is included. So like the official languages of Kenya are English, Swahili, and silence. But then there's also memory. Like
memory.
That's the sentence after.
Yep.
And it's from like this really, really wonderful book called Gas, which I absolutely love. And it's like, I guess, one of those quotes which is overquoted. Because it's very easy to quote. It's like, right? One of the things that is interesting to me about like my writing is that I mostly write about Kenya. Not necessarily because I want to only write about Kenya, but there's this way that a writer has to identify themselves as like, okay, first of all, I write about Kenya. And then like there's this like category which I hated for a really long time called Africa. Despite like the fact that like you can't actually be an Africa expert. That's just like, how the fuck does that work?
Yeah, right. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. But then like as a consequence of me being from Kenya, it means that it's easier for people to accept me writing about another country in Africa.
Sure.
That could be like, this is happening in Senegal, but I know nothing about Senegal whatsoever, right? But it's like this like vague notion of like of Africa. And I remember like a few months ago, I was like in someone's house, a bunch of like British dudes, and so I get in and like it's been raining and like I go to the shower, I'm giving warm clothes, some chocolate, some biscuits, and like I'm sitting in front of the fire and like I'm looking at the books, right? And it's all this like who's who of classic American and British literature, right? And it's like Hemingway and it's like Conrad and like all these people, and I'm looking at them as like interesting collection, right? And then like the person whose house it is goes, Carey, just so you're aware, there's the African screen in the next room. So if you want to look at that too, like feel free, right? And I look at him and I'm like, okay.
What am I supposed to take with this? Yeah.
Then of course, like I stayed there and we're talking some more, and then if I go to sleep and it's like, hey, remember, check out the African section, tell me what do you think? And of course, like, because I like looking at books, I want to check the African section. But there's like an insinuation like there that I hated, that like because I'm like from Africa, or like I'm from Kenya, I'm supposed to be like interested in like this sort of like um Kenyan writing and like African writing or whatever. And I think like that's one of the things I love about writing, about literature, about reading, is that like it's very it's universal. I mean, it's I remember I went through a spell of loving Franzen's writing. And like Franzen is like apparently like the picture of great white male American novelists of the age, right? But like for a spell, I loved his writing. It was like, I mean, like so I could love Franzen, I could love Juan Pamo, and I could love Elif Batuman, and I could love Arundhati Roy, and I could also love Yvonne.
Right.
And at some point, it doesn't matter if like Yvonne is a Kenyan writer, because like the fundamental things are like do I enjoy her writing? I know this doesn't quite answer your question.
No, but
the question was.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like it's interesting that you bring up the different influences, because I just finished some Japanese, right? I just finished Murakami for the first time. I read Kafka on the Shore. Very interesting, different. Read some French stuff earlier, but we were talking a little bit about place and home and silence and memory. And you mentioned that the kind of the national languages quote was a little bit cliche, but then let me hit you with two more that at least I know of, and looking up in this, but I loved was the Kenyan proverb, sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. So I really like that. But at the same time, it might not even be real. And then the last proverb that I really like is more of an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So again, those are very cliche, but at the same time, like they do instill some type of instance of memory or instance of jogging of some type of connection. So I guess just we can vibe a little bit more about like not just literary devices, but then also kind of what you were going on to in your talk about the library. I mean, your influences and your intellectualness and your intelligence does not have to just come from your place. It also can come from a vast, world of influences. So one of the things you also wrote about is in Literary Hub about the formation of a vibrant, intellectual scene in Nairobi because of these literary house parties. Was that one of them that you were talking about? So basically, can you give us a contemporary history of like, the influences of kind of Nairobi specifically in intellectual and writing and stuff, because it seemed like in 2003 in Nairobi, there was this whole resurgence of literary scenes. And I don't know what's happened since COVID, I guess, but maybe you can bring us up to speed.
So, just to start from the start, like the fundamental thing about like the idea of writing, the idea of a writer is that like, writing in the way that like, it's practiced and like in the way that I practice is inherently a Western concept, right? So this writer called Teju Cole, he was at the time he was being asked if he writes for the West, and he like reading his answer, you get the sense that he thinks this is a ridiculous question, because you're saying that like someone like Wole Soyinka or Chinua Achebe, when they were writing novels in the 1950s, their influences were most likely not Africans, right?
Right.
Their influences like Shakespeare and like the usual canonical people. And so like if a person was to think about the sort of like the Kenyan literary space, the only thing that makes it a Kenyan literary space is the fact that it's in Kenya, right?
Got it.
But otherwise, it's just literary space, right? And it's like the very same mechanizations that happen in like other literary spaces, right? That like at some point in November, like there'll be like the Nobel being announced, and there'll be like bookmakers, and someone will be like, Bob Dylan will never, ever, ever win it. And then he wins, and you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
Of course, like there's going to be like, I think every year for like the last 10 years, one of like there's like a list of like habitual Nobel contenders, right? The Haruki Murakami, Adonis,
Sure.
Philip Roth was like a contender for a long time, and then like Ngugi wa Thiong'o. So of course, like it means that like in Kenya, I guess like Kenyan people like care about literature are going to be like, oh, is Ngugi going to win this year? And then it doesn't win. And then we're like, oh, the academy doesn't care about Africans. But then like it will be like next year again, and we'll be like, oh, is Ngugi going to win this year? And there'll be like all these press people in his house in California, and they'll open the door, and like he'll be like, have I won? And they'll be like, no, but how do you feel about your loss, right? So like people like we care about, it's like, it's not just a Kenyan space. It's like if like say the thing that like people are talking about in the literary space is cut person, and how it was apparently inspired by someone else's life story. Of course, like people who care about like Anglophone literature in those spaces are also going to respond to that and be like, did you hear about that person? What the hell? What are we thinking about? And so like what happened in Kenya in 2003, because we're talking about one, it's like this sense that it's a global literary scene. But I guess like it's easier to like think of yourself as like being a writer if you have people around you who like also like have the same dreams, the same thinking, the same everything.
Sure.
So like they came together and they started something, right? But even like in that time, because I think so Binyavanga was one of like the main people, and he had like this friend on the internet called Chimamanda. Like they met on some messaging internet forum somewhere.
Oh, cool.
And they're like, oh, we are both writers. And then like they became like lifelong friends like after that until he died. And it's the same thing that happens like every other place, I suppose. Like you read someone's work and be like, oh, I want to read this person, right? Or like you'll meet on like the comment section of like some writer page, or like the comment section of Lithub, or like you know, like those people who have really long fights on the comment section of The Guardian.
They're very engaged. Yeah.
Very engaged. And like it doesn't matter if you're from Cameroon or from Indonesia or from
right.
Canada. It's like we all really care about this stuff.
Yep.
Like you're all going to be like, did you read James Wood's review of Zadie Smith's first book? Oh, he called it historical realism. How dare you? And you're like, or like, did you hear what like Rebecca Watts has to say about Instagram poetry? Oh, or like a friend of mine and I, like we've been like thinking about like literary fights and like all this like fun. I mean, I guess for the people involved, they're not fun, but like from the outside, they're like very fun, right? Of course, like Tom Wolf and Mailer and Updike. But then there's one between like Go Vidal and some other writer, I forget who.
Gore Vidal. Okay. Yep.
They meet at a party, and this writer punches Go Vidal, and Go Vidal says, "I see once again, words have failed you." And it's like, doesn't matter if like Go Vidal is American or like writes about the US. Like we all like, because fundamentally you enjoy writing, you like be able to like talk about like Arundhati's Roy visions of India, and like also talk about Hunter S. Thompson's vision of like 1970s America.
Yep.
And also talk about Gabe Garcia Marquez and Macondo. And also at the same time, I guess talk about Binyavanga and Yvonne and Chimamanda Adichie and all this, like, because like isn't that like the joy of reading, that like
absolutely
sort of like physical boundaries is like they don't really matter when you're reading and invested in them and the writing and the reading.
Right. Well, do you think, okay, so here, let's ask you as a writer then, maybe this is a little fun, like personal question, but do you think, I mean, when you're in the zone, like really like, you know, just writing and it just flowing through you, do you really think that that's kind of an extension of like a bottom up of all of your experiences and all your kind of lifelong journey and everything? Or do you think you're almost getting channeled through, like, as they say, the muse, it's coming down through you and you're kind of working? So how do you write? How do you come up with things? How do you edit yourself? What's your writing process?
I mostly don't edit myself.
Okay. No, that's easy. You just throw it out there and then we'll see what comes back,
I mean, like, say, like, the essays I write and have published, like, there are people who like edit them and like do phenomenal jobs editing them.
Yep.
But I think, like, actually, for both my fiction and my nonfiction, I guess I'm right, or really, I care deeply about style.
Got it. Okay.
Like push me like the proper stylist, push me Virginia Woolf and Nabokov, and like I'm all there for it. Which means that, like, sometimes people like praise some of my writing for being important or something like that, and I'm like,
did it catch your eye? Yeah. Was it interesting to read? Did it flow well?
And like, there are things that, like, that people on the internet have praised, like, I thought were like crap. Was like the style didn't like wow. So like, what happens, like, when like something, when like, say, like, I've started writing something, I'm thinking about it for a long time in my head. I think, was it Toni Morrison who like talked about like that process of like just thinking about a story before like writing it. You're just like thinking about what you're going to say. And of course, like, it's different for nonfiction, because like a lot of like the nonfiction I write is like very heavy on research.
Yep.
But like there is like a point when like there's no more research to be done. You have like all these pages of notes and you're just like now writing it. And like what I always do is that, like, if I don't have the structure right, I'm going to go and like read things I love, and like read people who did like things. I remember there was a time I was like really, I'm writing this novel, and there's a time I was like really, really struggling with it. I didn't touch it for maybe a year.
Okay.
And then I read Virginia Woolf for the first time.
Wow.
And it was very clear to me like what I need to do now. It was like, oh, she did it like that. Okay, we're going to do it like this too, right? And also like with essays, I remember like I was writing something I was writing, and there's this essay, this guy called Wright Thompson. He did this wonderful profile of Tiger Woods for ESPN a few years ago.
Okay.
So I'm writing this thing and I'm like, oh, he did it. When he writes about Tiger Woods, he has like a quotation from like Tiger Woods' his brother or sister or parent or something. I'm like, okay, I'm also going to open the quotation from someone. Right. And then like when it starts like actually like there's a point when like it just works, and it's like it comes out as a bus, and like you're sitting down for like 2 hours and you have like 4,000 words or something.
And you're deep in it and you're loving it. Yeah.
Deep in it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the thing happens where like I get really excited. Like if I feel like that sentence really works really well, I get excited and I'm pacing around my house and I'm like, cool. Right? Like I'm sitting down on my computer and like writing the sentence and like thinking about the sentence, and like there are moments, I think like my favorite moments of inspiration is like, I used to walk a lot. So like when I walked, I would like think about something and like send myself an email on my phone.
For sure.
But like nowadays, it's like I'll be in the shower. So like after I finish like the actual process of showering, I'm just like sitting there sometimes for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I'm just like sitting, right? And I used to like make sure I had like a notebook or like computer near the shower. Like something comes in a sentence. Like that is the sentence I was looking for. Like get out of the shower.
I will get out of the shower.
Like my hair is still wet. So like I'm on the computer, but I'm like my head is like this. My hair doesn't drip out onto the laptop.
That's great.
Yeah, like those
Well,
moments
you're
where you
committed.
just,
Yeah. Well, it seems like you're committed and you're like the epitome of the subreddit shower thoughts. You know what I mean? As soon as something comes up, you gotta strike while the iron's hot. And honestly, that's a good like psychological trick for me. It's like once it's kind of up, you gotta write it down. Gotta write it
just gotta
down.
write it down and like see where it goes. And if it's a sentence, because like mine like comes like in the form of sentences, you just like go with that sentence and like the next sentence and the next sentence.
Sure.
And then at some point you're like, yes, I've gotten it. I can go like take a break, but like I've gotten the voice, I've gotten the structure, I've gotten the style of this.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. So before we get into like some of your last writing that I really loved about the smart city or the failed smart city Konza, let's kind of give a brief history lesson for some people. So on December 12th, 1963, Kenya declared that its independence from Britain. So for a long time it was under colonial rule, through the UK, but then now through that, after the independence, it wasn't necessarily utopia after that. A lot of things happened. You had mentioned in a lot of your writing with the Kenyatta, et cetera. But I don't want to really, get too far on that. But I want to get to kind of the vestiges, like we began this conversation, of the vestiges of colonialism or the vestiges of the past and history. And you had talked about, African governments keep just burning money, planning smart cities. There's these McKinsey kind of blueprints, or these firms come in and kind of promise the moon or the universe or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you get the ongoing development and construction of it. And then after almost a decade, it hasn't really panned out. So I don't know if you want to tell briefly about, that kind of historical prestige, going into that. And then also like what has been kind of what's going on presently, with these kind of like failed governmental, contracts and things like that, and politics in general. Because that was a very interesting thing, and that was honestly the first thing that I wrote or I read of yours. What was that essay? So very interesting, and for me, going into the technological kind of ethics space and stuff like that, and STS, it was almost like a light bulb moment to me. Like, oh wait, all those ongoing developments in other countries. Like, of course, I thought about it in the West, but I totally kind of missed me on things in other parts of the world that the promises are still going out there and things are being built, but then a lot of things are failed promises or not up to snuff. So I guess just kind of talk on that, and we can continue from there.
So I think like part of the process of a nation state coming into itself is like just to like have all these myths of itself, and like one of the myths is like we're going to like have a new city or like a new town or like a new center. Sure. And like when like all these African like states got independence in like the 1950s and 1960s, a lot of them were like, we're going to have a new city, completely new city, we're going to build it up, whatever. And then like there was some, and not just like African cities, I guess like sometimes for like practical reasons. So Brasilia, which is like, okay, we're going to have a completely new capital city. Like the thing happening in Indonesia, where apparently Jakarta is sinking into the ground each year, and each year is becoming more unlivable. So like Indonesia has to like build a completely new city.
Wow. I knew about Brasilia though. They just made that in the 60s. Like, yeah.
The Jakarta thing is like the one which is like the city is literally sinking because it was built on a slab or something. It's literally sinking down. Or like the city in North Korea with like all these wide roads, but nobody, no pedestrians, no cars, nothing, right? So I remember when Konza City was announced, it was like, oh, Kenya's going to be a smart city.
Right.
And of course, like, didn't know what the hell a smart city was, right? It was just like a smart city. And then like after that, a chain of like other countries. I think Mauritius had been the first, and then Kenya, and then like a chain of other countries were like, we are also going to do smart cities. Let's have smart cities. Smart cities are like to show that like we belong in this like tech-dominated 21st century.
Yep.
But then like, so when I started writing it, like I was like, I didn't know, it was just like all these cities were like promised, but none of them exist, right? There's like the ones promised by governments, and then like there's like the weird chain of cities promised by Econ, where it's like I'm going to build Econ City in Senegal, and then another Econ City in Uganda, and I'm going to have like currency, Econ money or something. yeah, and then like reading all these things and like discovering like this story information about like smart cities in Asia, right? And the discovery that like the idea of smart cities is one of like the things that like um that proved to me that like this like identity of African is very shaky, because like that is not an African thing or like a nation thing. It's it's a thing that is like driven by like the shift in economic policy
Yep.
To like a more conservative like type of economics, right? So
Sure.
like the collapse of oil, whatever in the 70s, and then Thatcher and Reagan, and like all that stuff,
Yep.
right? And of course, like the big bad was like everywhere is McKinsey. And so discovering that like all these projects, like most of these projects, it's McKinsey blueprints. It's like, and reading like the projects and like they're all very similar to each other. Sure, place names are changed, right? Like one is set in Kenya, one is set in Rwanda, or one is set in India, or like something, right? But discover that like they're all like being pushed by either McKinsey or KPMG, or like a string of influential neoconservative consultancies, right? And so like the basic tenet underpinning all these things is like this like global economic power structure, and how like it has to like spread like all over the globe, right? I think it was Marisa Keegan showed an essay about wondering like why all of our classmates at TL are going to work in management consultancies. And so like at the time I'm writing this essay, like that's like the first time like it's starting to click to me that like, oh, all these friends I have who like went to Harvard or Yale or whatever, they're all working in management consultancies. Like,
yep.
like there's something I'm missing, right? It's
something,
like,
yeah.
I thought people wanted to become doctors or scientists, or like, but like they're all like becoming management consultants.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like let's go that like these smart cities are like it's a global thing. It's like
Yep.
young people who go to like Harvard or Yale from the US, who like a lot of them will end up at management consultants. Also like young people from Kenya and like from Nigeria and from like South Africa. So of course like the thing can never accuse like these management consultancies of is like a lack of diversity. That's not something you can accuse them of, right?
Yep.
But then like reading about the smart cities and being like, and not just some smart cities, and like I think in Kenya, like one of the things about like Kenya and about Nairobi is that like Nairobi has a lot of shopping malls, like a lot.
I've heard. I've never been, but I've heard.
And then like stumbling onto this McKinsey paper from 2008 or 2007 saying how the middle class in Africa is rising. And like this new middle class is going to like have money to burn to spend on Britain and hospitality. So the thing you've got to do as investors is make hotels and malls. And that's just like, oh shit, it's like that's why there are malls in Kenya. And then like all the things about like some random doctor, I think someone in Cameroon or some country, I don't remember the country. She was saying how like I don't remember the consultancy in question, but so like they come in and like they're advising how to like do the healthcare well, this and this not working. And she's really pissed off about like these kids half her age with literally no experience or 2 years experience telling her how to run a healthcare system. Right.
And the coming from out of Kenya, right? You know, telling you how to run Kenyan's healthcare thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but even if it's like someone from Kenya, it doesn't.
I see what you're saying. Yes. You could still have that education or that mindset and stuff from. Yep, I see. Yep.
Yeah. And so like I wrote the essay and then I discovered like someone else written a very similar essay about like Eco-Atlantic in Nigeria. She didn't like talk as much about the McKinsey of public service. But like there are all these like similarities about like this the shift, the liberation of economics, like Milton Friedman, and I can talk about Milton Friedman for days. And it's a global thing. It's like the same reason the American healthcare is non-existent is the same reason that Kenyan healthcare is non-existent. Because a bunch of people convinced, like, they put in power that, like, we've got to privatize everything. Let's make everything privatized. Like, demolish the public healthcare infrastructure. Let's and so it's like the same failures of the American health system, or like the same failures of the Kenyan health system, and the same failures of the Nigerian health system, because there's a common denominator at play in all these places.
Right. And that's like a almost like a mind virus, you know what I mean? Because like once it goes in and it sticks, because as you said, I mean, Milton Friedman stuff, I mean, that it's still around and still happening. One of the things also I wanted to talk to you about is not just like in terms of Kenya and Nairobi, but then also like women influences. You wrote a piece for Electric Literature that really spoke to me, and I'm wanted to order Dust because you mentioned it in this. But your observation of African women writers redefine society and literature led you to compile this list. So that you had I won't go through the top 10, but maybe can you just talk about literally how the importance of women's voices? You know, both of you and I are men, but as you were just talking about, we should strive for other observations, other voices, et cetera, not just in terms of geography and place and country, but also gender, ideas, nationalities, et cetera. So maybe can you talk about the influence of like women's literature on you, and then also maybe highlight some of the books that you had mentioned? I'll include it in the show notes and in the post, but maybe you just want to talk about that as well.
Just to be clear, what exactly is women's literature?
Like it. I like it, Carey. I like it. Literature. Let's talk about your literary influences then. You know what I mean? That just happens to be women. But yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, that's a very astute critique, though. You know, I mean, because a lot of people would maybe think that, but then with your critique, maybe they would think a little bit more open. So I definitely will continue that as I go along. It's literature, you know.
So of course I mentioned Yvonne, who was writing I love.
Yep.
And I love Namwali Sapel. She's a Zambian American Zambian.
Okay.
Writer. And Virginia Woolf, who is strong,
amazing
literary influence of mine. And I remember the first time I read Lauren Groff.
Okay.
I think it was Fates and Furies. Oh, that book, like, I was so sad after reading that book. And at some point I sent her an email, like my email was basically saying, "Hi, I love Fates and Furies. I love Florida. I love your work. Can we be friends? Can I be sending you emails regularly?" And she was like, "Yes, Carey, you may send me emails." But I got too excited, I think. And so went a long time without ever replying. I didn't know how to respond. I was like, now that I should say this, what am I going to ask? I don't know what to say. I don't know, right? So yeah. And of course, there's like, have I said J.K. Rowling? Though of course, like now, of course, like with like the thing you're saying about like bringing in new voices, right? And like J.K. Rowling being like the center of preserving a certain idea of womanhood, which is of course a problem, right? But I don't know, it's like the feeling of reading a good book, it's that, yes, definitely representation is important, right? Like definitely have like more women writers, have more non-white writers, have like more of that. when you love a book, you love a book, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, I was just trying to go along with, I had read Toni Morrison for the first time, like last year, and Song of Solomon and something. I don't know, for her, it's just kind of, I guess some of her takes, you could just tell that maybe it was a little bit of a woman, but it was just like interesting to me. And so, the fact that you have 10 books for, influences and people to check out, like that's more the interesting thing moving forward. And so do you have any like ones that you would recommend right now? Like, I mean, is Dust your one that you're most recommending right now to friends, family, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. Dust is a book I'll always recommend. Um, um, I went through a period of really loving Shumpalahi. But right now I'm obsessed with Sally Rooney. I didn't want to read her for a long time because she was the millennial writer, and I was like, a millennial writer, yuck.
A millennial, yeah. wait. You were just talking about literature and how it can be this. Like, are you aging us? Are you aging us? Yeah. No, but I'm with you.
I was like, so is this like the voice of my generation? I don't
right.
I'm like,
let's see what she got. Yeah, let's see what she has. Yeah.
And then I read Normal People, and it was fantastic. It was like, oh my God. And then I bought Conversation with Friends like the very next day. And I think her third novel is coming out in September.
Okay.
Like it's like one of the fun things about writing when generally people say that like someone is an amazing writer, most of the time like the people are not stupid, like they know exactly what they're saying, right? And of course like sometimes a person's like personal taste doesn't tally with the writer, an individual writer,
right?
But like most of the time, like when someone is really hyped and then you read their work and you're like, oh, that's why they're hyped. And
right.
Like,
good point.
Yeah.
So what are some future projects you're working on? We're second to last question. So like what are some things that are you interested in writing about? I mean, this doesn't have to get into things that you're currently editing or something, but are there any projects or series or anthology? I mean, you said you're working on a fiction book right now. Is that just kind of taking up a lot of your time?
Yeah, that's taking a lot of my time. I think I promised to send in a rewrite by September 1st.
Oh, so coming up. Okay.
I haven't started yet the rewriting process.
Okay.
But I have less than like 40 days. So of course I'm working on that and like a few journalistic projects, but like I'm one of those cliche journalist type people who only started like doing journalism type things because it pays money.
Well, got to keep that roof over your head and food on the table, Carey,
I hear you. Which is not to say that I dislike it, because like I enjoy a lot of the things that I ate.
Sure.
But like,
but that's a different style than your fiction, for sure.
Yeah. And I came into writing and reading as like fiction. When I was in high school, I was writing a novel. Like all my obsessions until I think the first time ever like started obsessing about nonfiction, I was maybe 20 or 21. But like all my prior obsessions were like fiction.
Before. Oh wow. Harry Potter, man, doing a number on you from the beginning.
I mean, like there was a time when like I went through a bit of a like Dan Brown craze.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
I guess like a lot of people did. Like you're all like talking about like, oh, this symbol actually means this, and the Catholic Church and the library has like a secret book about like the Knights Templar. And then you Google, oh wait, the Knights Templar are a real organization, and oh my God, they were actually killed.
No kidding.
Does Jesus have a wife and descendants?
Yeah.
So I guess like the usual things, Daniel Steele, Sidney Sheldon.
Okay.
And then at some point I was like 15 or something. I was like, you know what? I don't read this stuff anymore. I'm above this. I do serious. I don't do none of that Harry Potter stuff.
Right.
It's like
I'm a serious intellectual writer. Yeah.
I'm a serious intellectual now. Like, let's talk about serious people. Let's talk about Balzac.
Yeah, right.
What is this Dan Brown nonsense?
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, here, so let's finish up. Last question. So I don't know if you're familiar with the overview effect or not, but that's kind of what my whole spiel is like, the overview effect is when the astronauts go up into space and see the Earth from space. So there's only been like 600 out of 10 billion humans, since we've been around for 200,000 years, that have actually seen that. And so I always want to give the last question to our guests to maybe impart some wisdom. I mean, it doesn't need to be some cliche of, be cool to everyone or some kumbaya moment, but it's more of just to kind of give credence to whatever you guys think or what a guest thinks about what we, the viewers or the world could use better of. So I'm kind of allowing you now to kind of, what would you say to the world at this point, if you had a platform to, or what should we be considering to trip over our own truths, to kind of uncover bias, move past and become, better humans. Let's flourish together, Carey. How do we do that?
Wow. I don't know how to become better humans. What I would say is that I love people who are obsessed about books.
Yeah.
Like people who have fights about books. People who like the idea of reading is a thing that like pushes them going. It's like the thing that like keeps them going. So like to have like more of those people, like we don't need like doctors or like engineers or like any of that stuff. Like all that stuff is useless.
We're good. We've been there. Yeah.
But like we need like people who like obsess about reading.
Sure.
I'm not just saying this because I hope to have a book published soon and like it will have people who buy it.
Right.
So that I pay rent. I'm not just saying that.
Not just, you're very, very for practical reasons too. But at the same time, though, the curiosity, we need some dreamers, maybe not some, Imagineers, exactly the John Lennon style, but we need some, more people reading books, as you say, and the ideas flourishing. I like that. Anything else?
Yeah. Like, I mean, like the idea of reading books is also we need like Hugh Grant to have more movies.
We need more Hugh Grant movies. Yeah. All right. So more books, more Hugh Grant movies. All right. Done and dusted. We got you, Carey. Cool. Well, I think that we won't keep too much of your time for everybody, but I think this will be a fruitful conversation for a lot of people in our network. But I just want to say thanks for coming on Conversations, Carey.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. So until next time, Ad Astra.